imagine for a second, documenting your life so meticulously that you are writing like over 700 journal entries every single year.
Oh, wow. That's a massive undertaking.
Right. I mean, you are logging the intricate details of your software code, tracking the exact metrics of your daily diet, and even documenting the precise moment your pet fish decide to spawn.
Just capturing every single data point of your day-to-day existence.
Exactly. And today, we're looking at what happens when a mind operating with that level of extreme digital control steps outside, looks at a crushed purple berry on a concrete sidewalk, and sees, well, the ultimate open source technology.
It really is this profound collision of worlds, isn't it? We spend so much time, compartmentalizing knowledge. Like we put computer science in one box and botany in another.
Totally.
But there's this incredible richness that emerges when you cross-pollinate those disciplines. When you take the analytical framework of a software engineer and use it to decode a seemingly mundane moment in nature, the everyday world suddenly looks entirely different.
Okay, let's unpack this because our source material for today's deep dive it's not a peer-reviewed biology paper or a gardening textbook.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a single journal entry from a wildly prolific blog at qianmeng.org. And it's written by someone who simply describes himself as an old software plumber named Ang.
I love that phrase, old software plumber.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And to truly understand this specific post, which is charmingly titled Notes on Gardening Part 864, The Staining Beauty of the Kelat Oil Tree, we first have to understand the staggering database of a human mind that sat down to write the previous 863 parts.
Right, because the context of who Ang is completely shapes how he interprets that tree. On his site, he positions himself as a tinkerer, specifically someone deeply immersed in free, libre, and open source software, or FLOSS.
The open source world.
Exactly. He spends his nights writing code, managing systems, and just really engaging with digital architecture. But what really stands out is the sheer, unrelenting volume of his documentation.
It's unbelievable.
It is. Looking through his archives from 2022 to 2025, you see this metronomic consistency. I mean, he publishes exactly 730 or 732 posts every single year.
Basically 2 posts a day, rain or shine, for years.
Yeah.
By April of 2026, which is when he wrote the entry about the tree, he had already crossed 300 posts for that year alone. It's almost like he's running a GitHub repository for his own human existence.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
And when you look at his project tags, you see these incredibly dense technical subjects living right alongside deeply physical, messy hobbies. Like in a single month, you will find Notes on Haskell Programming Part 106, sandwiched right between Notes on Fishkeeping Part 231.
And that juxtaposition is crucial here. Let's look at what he's actually doing with that. Haskell, for example, is a purely functional programming language.
Right.
It is notorious for its strictness. It demands absolute mathematical precision. And if your logic isn't flawless, the compiler simply rejects your work.
It just won't run.
Exactly. It throws an error. And then he has entries on Elixir and Erlang. And those are languages built for massive concurrent systems where everything must be highly controlled. He spends his professional and creative energy in these unforgiving binary environments.
Yeah, he's logging his work in Python, Go, and Rust too. And then seamlessly, the blog pivots to Notes on Dieting Part 111, or his beta spawn logs.
Yes, the fish logs.
Right. He is literally tracking the reproductive cycles of his aquarium fish with the exact same rigorous numerical system he uses to track an AI typesetting library. And he even documents his support for organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, the Tor Project, and Wikipedia.
Which tells us so much about his fundamental worldview, you know? Those affiliations show he believes in decentralized systems. He believes that information, whether it's the source code for an operating system or the collective knowledge of humanity on Wikipedia, should be free, transparent, and open for anyone to modify and improve.
I have to admit, though, when I first read through a project list structured like that, I felt a little bit of friction.
Really? How so?
Well, my immediate reaction to seeing something like Notes on Exercises Part 18, or like logging a garden's progress as if it's a software big database, doesn't that just kill the vibe?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, I just wonder if applying a strict numerical tracking system to an organic living thing kind of drains the joy out of it. We usually think of a garden as a place to escape our spreadsheets, right? Not a place to generate new ones.
That is such a common reaction. We often assume that hyperanalysis and emotional appreciation are mutually exclusive. Like we think that if you are counting and categorizing, you aren't really feeling.
Exactly.
But for a hacker mindset, analysis is the very language of appreciation. In a programming environment, you are trying to tame chaos into defined logic. You have total authority.
Right. You write the rules.
But when you switch to gardening or fish keeping, you lose that authority. You are managing highly unpredictable variables. I mean, you can write the most elegant code in the world, but you cannot force a bed of fish to spawn or a seed to germinate just by typing a command.
You just have to, set up the environment, tune the parameters, and hope the biology decides to execute its own program.
And Eng knows that. His approach isn't an attempt to drain the joy out of the physical world. It's actually an attempt to open source it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, when he meticulously documents dealing with hydroponic issues in Part 860 or restarting the fine gravel planted tank in Part 863, he isn't trying to strip the magic away. He is creating a public repository of knowledge.
So others can use it.
Exactly. He's logging the trial and error of his daily life so that anyone else on the internet can learn from his iterations.
I get that, but I am still a little skeptical. A flower isn't a pull request, you know. Doesn't a person with this mindset ever just want to sit on a park bench and smell the roses without logging it as feature request? Aroma?
That's a funny way to put it.
I mean, there has to be a point where the analytical brain just turns off, doesn't it?
I'd argue the hacker brain never really turns off. It just shifts its focus from the synthetic to the organic. For someone like Aang, the joy doesn't come from turning his brain off. It comes from understanding the mechanism.
Figuring out how it ticks.
Right. When you spend your life figuring out how complex systems work, discovering a new undocumented system in nature is thrilling. It's not about turning a flower into a spreadsheet. It's about recognizing that the flower is a piece of brilliantly engineered technology that runs on sunlight and water instead of electricity.
Well, that makes the transition to April 12, 2026 so much more compelling. Because Aang steps away from his screens, he leaves the Haskell parsing and the Elixir code behind, and he takes his daily walk.
And nature interrupts him.
Yeah, he comes across a very messy piece of nature that completely disrupts his routine.
This is where he encounters the subject of post number 864, the Kelat Oil Tree, or, as it's known scientifically, Syzygium myrtifolium.
Right in the opening of his post, he mentions that this is a bit of a departure for him. He says that in his own gardening indulgences, he typically focuses on flowering plants.
Yeah, he usually goes for the blooms.
So this tree caught his eye, not because of some spectacular flower, but because of its fruit. And more specifically, what the fruit was doing to the ground beneath it.
The visual description provided in the source is striking. The Kelat Oil Tree produces these small, round, fleshy berries, but it is their color that is so unusual. They are an incredibly deep, dark purple, almost an inky black.
Wow.
And the fascination for Aang isn't just seeing them hanging perfectly on the branches, it's the aftermath.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When these fleshy berries ripen and fall onto the concrete pathway, they become completely unavoidable obstacles.
You can't just walk around them.
No, pedestrians walking by inevitably step on them. The berries burst under the weight of a shoe, and because they contain this incredibly potent dark pigment, they smear and stain the pavement.
It creates a huge mess.
Yeah, Aang describes it as a bit of a mess for the pavement, but a fascinating sight for a plant lover.
That phrase, the staining beauty, is so evocative. It really challenges our default programming as modern city dwellers.
It really does. Think about the last time you walked past a smashed berry or like a muddy puddle on the sidewalk. Most of us just instinctively step around it.
Yeah, we don't want to get our shoes dirty.
Exactly. We see a nuisance. We see something that might ruin our sneakers or a maintenance issue that the city needs to come power wash away. But Aang looks at this exact same purple smear on the concrete and sees staining beauty.
Which is incredible coming from a software guy.
Right. He has a mind dedicated to eliminating messy code and finding clean, elegant solutions, yet he is absolutely captivated by a literal mess on the pavement.
Because he recognizes what that mess represents. It isn't just dirt to him, it's chemistry. It is a biological mechanism executing its function perfectly in a chaotic environment.
I was thinking about how a software engineer processes an event like this, and it almost feels like those purple stains on the pavement are the tree's physical log files.
Ah, I love that analogy, log file.
Yeah, because in software, a log file is a permanent record that an event occurred, right?
Yeah.
It tells you that a program executed a specific action at a specific time, and these smashed berries are nature's log files.
Yes.
They are permanent, Highly visible record that this tree exists, that it ran its reproductive cycle, dropped its fruit, and that someone walked past it and triggered the next phase.
That log file analogy perfectly captures the shift in perspective Aang is inviting us into, because a log file can look like absolute gibberish, just a messy wall of text, unless you know how to read it.
Just a blur of data.
Right. And to the average pedestrian, the sidewalk is just dirty. They see a bug in the system of a clean urban pathway. But Aang reads the log file. He sees the potency of the plant's pigment. Changing our perspective like this can turn a daily annoyance into a structural marvel.
It changes everything.
It's about choosing to see the underlying mechanism rather than just the surface mess.
And when a tinkerer notices a fascinating mechanism, they can't just stare at it and walk away. They have to poke it.
They have to test it out.
Exactly. They have to see if they can run the code themselves. That curiosity drives the final part of his journal entry, where his thoughts naturally pivot toward cultivation.
Observation almost always demands experimentation for someone who spends their life building and testing systems.
He writes, as usual, the first thought that came to mind was, can we cultivate these seeds? He isn't satisfied with merely appreciating the tree's log files on the pavement. He wants to interact with its source code.
He wants to get his hands dirty.
Yeah, he wants to take the raw materials, set up his own environment, and see if he can compile the Kelat Oil Tree on his own terms.
Yet, as he looks closer at the base of the tree, he realizes that the system is already compiling itself perfectly without any human intervention.
He looks down at the margins of the concrete pathway, and he notices small seedlings already sprouting. They're just pushing their way up right there in the cracks in the dirt adjacent to the pavement.
In that harsh urban environment.
Yeah. He notes, there's something quite resilient about how they pop up right where they fall. So what does this all mean? This raises a really interesting question about how we interact with the natural world.
It really does.
If nature is basically just dropping its source code onto the hard pavement for anyone to fork, modify, and grow, is Aang's desire to take those seeds home and cultivate them a way of trying to tame that wild resilience? Or is it his way of participating in an open source project?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is entirely about participation. And more importantly, it provides a masterclass in the concept of resilience.
How so?
Well, think about the stark contrast between the software Aang writes at night and the seedlings he finds on his morning walk. Computer code is incredibly fragile.
Oh, absolutely. A compiler isn't going to guess what you meant. If you forget to close a bracket, or if a single semicolon is out of place, the entire application just refuses to run.
It just breaks.
It throws an error, and the whole system halts.
Precisely. Software requires a sterile, perfectly controlled environment to function. It demands absolute syntax. But then you look at biological code, the DNA inside those Kelat oil seeds.
It's a completely different story.
They do not have a pristine environment. They fall out of a tree onto a harsh concrete pathway. They get stepped on by 100 pedestrians, crushing their fleshy exterior and spilling their dark pigment everywhere.
Yeah.
They are exposed to intense sun, rain, and the total unpredictability of a city sidewalk. In a server room, someone stepping on your hardware is a catastrophic failure.
The end of the world. But for the tree, getting stepped on isn't a bug, it's a feature.
Yes.
A crushing weight of a pedestrian's shoe is actually the mechanism for seed dispersal. Biology is using the chaos to its advantage.
That is the brilliant distinction here. Biological code is robust and self-executing. Life finds a way to execute its programming even when the parameters are completely chaotic.
It's amazing.
And for a software plumber like Aang, watching a system not only survive, but actually thrive in an unoptimized, hostile environment is something to deeply admire. It's the ultimate resilient architecture.
He ends the post simply by writing, something to explore in the future, and then he just signs off for the day.
Such a classic hacker sign-off.
It really is. The curiosity isn't definitively solved. It's just queued up as a ticket for the next iteration.
There's always another bug to track, another seed to plant, another system to understand.
So to wrap up our deep dive today, let's look at the incredible journey we have taken through just a few paragraphs of a blog. We started inside the massive, highly ordered digital archives of an old software plumber. We navigated through floss projects, strict numbering systems, and the unforgiving logic of Haskell and Elixir.
We examine a mind that constructs order out of digital chaos.
But then we followed that same mind out the door, away from the glow of the monitor, and down a concrete pathway. We stopped at a messy, deep purple smear on the ground.
The staining beauty.
Exactly. And by borrowing his perspective, we didn't just see a dirty sidewalk that needed to be cleaned. We saw staining beauty. We saw the incredibly resilient source code of the Kelat oil tree popping up right where it fell, utilizing the crush of pedestrian shoes to brute force a new generation into existence.
It serves as a potent reminder that the open source systems of nature are running silently all around us. They are constantly iterating, adapting to chaos, and dropping brilliant data points right at our feet.
If you are listening to this on your commute, or walking your dog, or just taking a break from staring at your own digital screens, I think that is the core takeaway.
Absolutely.
In a world where we are constantly bombarded with information overload and the pressure to optimize every single second of our routines, there is immense, profound value in simply allowing yourself to be distracted by the physical world's messy code.
Just letting the mess happen.
Yeah. You don't have to be a trained ecologist to appreciate the mechanisms of a plant. Just like you don't have to be a senior software engineer to appreciate a clever solution to a problem.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to look down at the pavement and actually decode what is happening right in front of you.
Which leaves us with a final thought to consider as you go about your day. If nature operates like this massive, open source system, endlessly dropping resilient, brilliant seeds right at our feet, what messy, staining beauties in your own life are you walking past right now just waiting to be cultivated?